創始先行乱らば天罰大地星雲正すは天命罪悪は義より異で義よりも重しダークネス行動爆発には慣れていますよーだ。
Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Mysterious Heroine XX Alter. She's a limited 4-star foreigner that becomes playable as a part of Archetype Inception, the third Ordeal Call. Specifically, she's on the same banner as BB Dubai and Summer Tenochtitlan. This puts her opposite Ciel, Dobrynia, and Zhu Fu. As you'll soon find out, that last part is kind of important. Ecchan's Noble Phantasm is Flash of Origin, yet chaotic. This is a single-target buster attack with separate preemptive power mods against lawful and good enemies. So if they're both lawful and good, they get double whammied. And for the uninitiated, power mods are effects that can bleed onto your follow-up cards. So if you go NP Buster Buster with Ecchan's cards, those two busters get this effect as well. This is in contrast to super effective damage, which only applies to the NP itself. Here, Ecchan has damage against ruler servants. Its magnitude is fixed, but at 200%, which is higher than the 150 you normally get. In other words, she hits like an Avenger against those ruler servants, at least for the NP itself. And before I forget, Ecchan also gets 20% flat charge and an overcharge effect for one turn of preemptive NP damage. One upside of all this is that your average ruler is also lawful good, meaning that Flash of Origin can triple whammy servants like Potato Jean, Amaxa, Qinshi Huang, Karen, Johanna, Estrella, and Metatron Jean. Not to mention that Ordeal Call 4, Trinity Metatronius, is full of rulers, so you won't be lacking for targets in the near future. Though rulers themselves get a persistent power mod during that chapter, so you could just use those instead. The downside for Ecchan is that the same chapter is filled with non-servant rulers too, so she has something of a Draco problem where her damage is a very big gap between servants and non-servants, at least as far as rulers go. Of course, the anti-lawful good buffs don't care, so at least you can fall back on those. Ecchan's premise of being a foreigner who can fight rulers is some cool theming, but her restrictions beg a number of questions. The big one is whether it'd be easier just to use an Avenger instead. Class advantage is one hell of a drug. This I'll kick a few minutes down the road. The other question is how well she can sustain her Noble Phantasm. NP-focused buster servants like her live and die by their batteries and cooldowns, so let's give those a proper look. Quantum Armor is her main defensive cooldown and Star Engine. It gives 2 its worth of invulnerability, 3 turns of attack, and a Stardom/Stars Return combo. 15 stars on each of those at level 10, at which point it also caps out at a 7-turn cooldown. Every servant wants a protection effect, and foreigners in particular really want them, since they do double damage to each other. As a nice bonus, this somewhat compensates for the lack of defensive class advantage when fighting rulers. Star Income is always nice on buster servants, since they rely on Koyanskaya's Star Dump otherwise, and MHXXA can put these to use with Heavy Object, Gravitational Manipulation. I can't read this without thinking about the anime Heavy Object. It was about these big fucking machines going to town on each other, more like moving fortresses than humanoid mecha. But the thing I remember the most about it? It had those nasty fucking bass-boosted explosions that were really popular in the 2010s, a bit like Fate Apocrypha. As for what this skill actually does, it provides 3 turns of a buster buff, buster star absorption, and crit damage. To get more bang for your buck on this front, I'd equip Ecchan with crit damage command codes. Though for fights where they're relevant, you can also consider a pair of anti-buff codes. The Kiara code grants additional damage against lawful enemies and rulers. Crown of the Fairy King, which comes later this year, also gives anti-lawful damage, though it's paired with NP gain. So I'm thinking maybe you stick it on an arts card. The last of Ecchan's skills is Villains Terminate, Extremity of Villains. This is an AoE charge reduction debuff against your enemies and a 3-turn NP gain effect for herself. More importantly, it gives her 10% charge for every enemy on screen, plus a separate amount that scales off levels. This second effect caps out at 20%. So worst case scenario, this is a 30% battery if there's only one enemy on screen. Unfortunate for pure boss encounters, but if you're trying to work Ecchan into a farming team, you can potentially get her a nice bounty of charge. If you're only using this on a wave that Ecchan has to handle by herself, you get questionable value, but a lot of 90++ nodes mix and match single enemy waves with larger packs, so you can actually hold this and use it when your AoE attacker is up to bat. Ecchan just sneaks in and grabs some extra charge for herself. Against a 3 enemy wave, you get 50% total charge. And if you're against one of the rare clusterfuck waves that has 6 enemies on screen at the same time, that's a whopping 80%. Even setting aside this edge case, the variability of this skill is why you want to grab a pen 2 for more starting charge. May as well get a pen 5 while you're at it, because much like Quantum Armor, Extremity of Villains has a massive 7-turn cooldown. If you haven't been reading ahead, a pen 5 gives cooldown reduction for the first time you use each skill in a given battle. we're getting it this anniversary, and with its help, you can feasibly double cast Ecchan's skills without the Atlas uniform when you're running 2 coin Skies of Light. Craft essence wise, you're looking at the standard Buster package. Black Grail for bosses and fights where Ecchan only needs to handle a single wave, and first day of filming if charge is an issue. Sorry to say she doesn't really lend herself to fuckery on this front. Her Bonsi gives party-wide anti-lawful and anti-good damage, but realistically, even if you make Ecchan a Grand Servant, you'll be going with option B. Grand Servants can freely equip their Bonsi E on top of others, having the choice between using its actual effect or getting 50% starting charge instead. Ecchan is a pretty needy servant, and if you plan to run her in multi-core teams, her partner's gonna need to pull some serious weight. Ashia Doman is a good place to start. Not only does he buff chaotic and evil servants, of which Ecchan is both, but he can insta-kill any wave of bronze, non-servant enemies. Combine this with his massive battery, and he's a low-maintenance way of keeping XX Alter on task. In March 2027, Lancer Artoria is going to get an upgrade that turns her party attack buff into one that also buffs NP damage, with even more NP damage for round table servants, which Ecchan technically is. Lartoria is also an AoE attacker, so she can clear the path for XX Alter to do her job. John Lackland is a very recent servant on JP, added in the Strange Fate crossover, and he has a number of powerful synergies. On top of party attack and crit buffs, he has a targeted Buster battery cooldown reduction combo, and Ecchan can work every single one of those elements to her advantage. And John gets something in return. His Noble Phantasm scales off the number of kings and evil units on the field, including his own team. As you may have surmised, Ecchan is both of these things, as is Oberon, who happens to be an excellent support. Occasionally a supplemental attacker, but usually a support. He's your typical swap-in for 90++ team building, since he provides a massive infusion of charge and damage for turn 3 plays. Olga Marie is next year's anniversary servant, and she provides a sweeping set of party buffs that are of particular interest to a Buster servant like Ecchan. Her specific kit changes based on her ascension, but the short version is that her 3rd ascension provides more party value, including charge, while her other ascensions have access to a CLS card swap. For option B, you can have Olga pop this to draw all of her cards, and then use a mystic code to replace her with Ecchan, who will inherit those cards. This lets you guarantee a Buster Brave chain at the start of a fight, and is particularly useful in the extra 2 Grand Servant tools, where CL isn't an option. Otherwise, you run Ascension 3 Olga and Ecchan together up front, where the former can handle enemies with her own AoE Noble Phantasm. You can even leverage its effect to give 10% charge party-wide and another 10% to star attribute servants. Guess what? Ecchan fits that bill. Boss fights give you one more option for a partner, Van Gogh. Her Noble Phantasm gives a significant amount of crit damage for Entity of the Outer Realm servants like Ecchan. Now the elephant in the room is that against enemies where the double Go stun lock is viable, that presents a much more stable game plan. But for debuff Immune Quarry, having Go play support can be quite effective. Some odds and ends. Ecchan has multiple sources of passive debuff resistance, so if it seems like she's ducking more trouble than her teammates, that's probably why. Also, while I mostly talked about her anti-ruler matchups, she double whammies a number of notable servants on account of them being lawful good. Kukulkan and Mysterious Heroine XX are also foreigners, so Ecchan has offensive class advantage against them too. Kentoki, Nightingale, Arjuna Alter, and Penthesilea are berserkers, so Ecchan gets defensive advantage. King Ashoka and Lord Logris aren't quite as favorable due to their class, but there's a non-zero chance you'll be fighting them with Ecchan, the latter specifically if you choose to make XXA a Grand Servant. Ecchan is a servant with very pronounced strengths. She can dumpster lawful good servants, especially if they're rulers, berserkers, or they're foreigners, and her very high attack stat makes her a good platform for all the buster and crit buffs she wants to receive. But these strengths are counterbalanced by instability. She wants to spam out her Noble Phantasm, but her main battery scales off the number of enemies on the field, which is not exactly ideal for her boss-killing application. And her skills, while filling multiple functions, have fairly long cooldowns that require additional append skill investment and babysitting to play around. In multi-core, she can potentially work, but the conditional nature of her battery is a real double-edged sword. Your team will live and die by enemy formations, and small changes on this front can wreck your entire plan. If you don't enjoy bean counting, this can make team building pretty obnoxious. Lastly, Ecchan's anti-ruler function can also be filled by Summer Zhu Fu, who's a worse servant taken purely in a vacuum, but she has the advantage of being on a much better banner. CL is a very high priority servant, certainly higher than Ecchan's banner mate to PB Dubai. Even the other 4-star is a matchup that favors the CL banner. So despite today's subject being a solid servant with definitive strengths, it's hard to justify a detour just to fish for Mysterious Heroine XX Alter. Thanks for watching, lads. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more, and come watch me on twitch.tv/Finotaisen, where I stream every weekend, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. For June, I'm juggling some nostalgic curveballs with multiplayer subscriber games, so you might get a chance to get on the big screen. I'll see you there. It was about these big fucking machines going down on each other. Very different anime.